So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar, the how to build communities of resilience or communities of engagement, as Second Tree loves to call them, right? And I'm very grateful to be here today with Giovanni Fontana, the CEO and co-founder of Second Tree, this organization that supports refugees and works with refugees. My name is Ilaria Boffa, and I am the Education and Program Manager and Community Manager for 6 Seconds in 6 Seconds Europe. And again, I'm very grateful to be here today with Giovanni. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Ilaria. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, so let's start immediately with the Second Tree model. So can you please share a little bit? I know you have a short presentation, and if we can deep dive into your model, and then we can start from there. Thank you.
What I thought is that I would start by explaining not only the model, but how it started, in the sense that many of the things that we learned, almost all of them, were things that we didn't know at the beginning, that basically we found ourselves in. And this story starts in 2016, at the height of the Syrian refugee crisis, at the beginning of 2016. This was the first picture that I took of the camp when we arrived, like uh, a plan of stones with 1,500 people living in tents. They were given a place in a tent, a couple of blankets, and they were basically sleeping in stones, on the stones. This is the first task that I myself did, like just going around the factories there to collect leftover foam for people to basically be sleeping on something. And what happened then was that since we, as volunteers there, at the time Second Tree had not even been created, since we had no clue, we didn't know what to do. We didn't know what community engagement was. We were trying to do community engagement without even knowing that that was the thing. And there was not really a guidance. This was very much the height of the emergency. There was no international organizations, no state authorities, a little bit of the military, and that's good because the least that they were doing, the better it was. And so we started we went to this community that was in this camp, and we said, we have no idea how to do this. So if you want us to help you, you have to help us help you. And so we started doing things that might be maybe more in line with what 6 Seconds preach than what the humanitarian sector does, or what the humanitarian sector's principle or standard principles are. Like in one sense, we started, spending time with people, trying to understand them, trying to even discuss having a meaningful engagement, sometime at an agreement. And so we would go into people's tents, we would spend time with people, we would have tea with people, because all of those things were important for the people who were displaced, were of course refugees, were victims of a lot of things, but were more than other people. And at the same time, we realized very quickly and through many mistakes that it was very important to have clear and very strict rules. That's because people that were coming to that camp and to many other camps had been discriminated many times in their lives. It was sort of the most understandable explanation for anyone to think that there would be favoritism or there would be discrimination. So what we understood is, in order for me to go in Mohammed's and Fatima's tent and be able to spend 1 hour or 2 hours and understand what are their needs, I need to have a very clear reputation in which I will not give a better service to them than to the other people just because I spend time with them. And we clearly didn't know this at the time, but we quickly realized that this was sort of the opposite of what is the common mantra of the humanitarian sector, which is being friendly, not friends. We were not friendly. We applied rules very strictly. We were telling people what the situation was. If someone was in a difficult legal situation for the asylum case, we would tell them. But at the same time, friends, spending time with people, engaging with them, not having this sort of distance or sometimes interpreted as professional distance. And a good way to explain this was explaining the
How
story of
beautiful
this
this
guy.
picture. I love this one.
What do you think this is?
Well, I read School of Hope. Maybe it's the place where you then, with some refugees, you taught people something, maybe English or whatever it was needed at that time.
It was indeed the school, but it's also true that the fact that you can imagine this being a school is something that is based on the idea of what a community can create. Because if there was written helicopter or banana on that tent, you wouldn't think that is a banana or a helicopter. You know that that could be a school because you know that the community that is there can somehow make that into a school, even if that's not the school that me or you, who happen to
Mhm.
be from the same country, went to, very far from them. And this was actually the only tent at the time, at the beginning of 2016, that had wooden flooring. You can see it inside the
Yeah. Yeah.
tent. And actually, what happened at the time was that we we I have to be slightly vulgar here. We found ourselves in the shit in the mornings. Why? Because, I mean, this literally, there were 13 toilets in all of the camp for 1,300 people. And this was the only place that was clean for people to go and do their needs. But what was happening was that us, as volunteers, every morning would go to what was at the time our school and start trying to clean what had been done and what some of the people in the camp had done their needs there. And initially, our approach was sort of, oh, these are people that have gone through a lot. These are people that are victims of war. We have to do it for them. We have to, like they are victims. We have to somehow make up for this. But slowly we realized that actually the people who were the most committed helpers in the camp, like the volunteers who were the ones who accepted to do this very ungrateful task of basically cleaning people's um, waste,
Yeah.
were the ones that were starting to think, oh, I don't like these refugees. Some of them were saying, oh, started becoming racist. So what we did was that we started saying, okay, maybe this is not the right thing to do. I sometimes you saw this drawing. I sometimes tell this story in schools, and this is a drawing that a girl actually in Italy, in Veneto, made for me. This was a 11-year-old girl, and you can see that there is me with the shovel, with the secondary T-shirt, and the tent with,
Mhm.
like uh, but I think the funny thing is that she made me with hair, and then realized that was a mistake. It so started.
Yeah.
But anyway, what is the value of the story? The value of the story is that not only we were being patronizing and we're saying, trying to, provide for something, but it was that at that time, that day, I met Firas. Like I didn't know Firas. I knew everyone in the camp. I had been there for 2 months already, and I actually knew everyone more or less. I have a sort of Excel mindset, sort of, I knew everyone by tent number, etc., etc. And I had
Yeah.
never met Firas. And Firas was an electrician from the resort in Syria. And that time he went out of his tent and said, okay, Giovanni, leave it to us. I will personally go tent by tent and talk to people and tell them, look, we need to do this. This is important for the community. This is important for our children. We need to do it. You give us wood, you give us English and German teachers, but we will do it ourselves with your help. We are part of the same community. And so Firas started, you know, advocating for that. This is when we started building together a better school. Not the ideal school in the sense that it's not the school that everyone has gone to, but clearly better than what it was. It could also serve as a gym for Hussein, as you can see here.
Why not? And probably it's even better than some of our schools, our perfect schools that we have.
for sure for the hope that the parents were putting in that. And this is the bell. This is the bell that Firas would ring every morning, uh, attracting the curses of many of the parents who were still sleeping. But this was sort of like his symbol. What he was using every morning. He was the headmaster of the school, and and once the camp closed, sadly it reopened many years, 1 year later. But when it closed, I had the readiness to save the bell and go to Firas and give it to him the day that he left to go to Sweden. He now lives in Sweden. And I had seen Firas go through the weight of the world, even more than the weight of the world. If you can see here, carrying even me. I had never seen him cry. I had never seen him cry when his daughter Mary was born in the camp. But when I brought him this spell, he just started crying and crying and crying because that was the meaningful. That was what identity and what community was created in that sense. That was his role and how he had a purpose and how he was not only a victim. So
Exactly.
this is
And sorry, you used already this term victim. And when we had a chat, prior to this webinar, when we also met here in Padua, you told me that we need to change the narrative of refugees and we need to change our view on them. And probably they do not want to that we see them as victims, right? So it's a term that victimizing them and considering them kind of, in an inferior situation. This is not helpful somehow.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that it's often we do it in good faith. Often
Of
people who do it
course.
are people who want to help. Like there is this idea that uh, like people have gone through a lot, and that's the only thing you can do. So what we try to do is to kind of reverse this idea, to see people for what they are, and to see people in a way that um, is more focused on things that they have chosen. So not something that just happened to them, being a refugee, having to escape war, something positive, something that they define. Like Mahnaz is a person who likes Korean music, not someone who was expelled by the Taliban or persecuted, and something focused on the future. And we say that we need to see people with care, so we seeing them as capable, accountable, and reasonable, and in a word, equal. And you can see the similarity between this and saying that we have to know, choose, and give, but also expect other people to know, choose, and give. We don't have to enter an interaction with another person thinking, oh, they won't be able to know, they won't be capable, they won't be accountable. And I think this is a very important uh, highway, let's say, because it goes both ways. This is a flower that was built by Rob Timmerman. He is actually uh, working now on the Sea-Watch, one of the boats that rescue people in the Mediterranean. And the first day I arrived at the camp, he was building wooden flowers with the kids. And I thought that there is every need in this camp. There is food that is needed. There are clothes that are needed. Why are you doing this? I didn't say that. But clearly, I had that framework. I was not realizing how important it was for people to have a degree of beauty. And this flower is up in the camp to this day,
Beautiful.
many years later. And that shows like the kind of approach that I was having and sort of prejudice. This is exactly the same thing that happened with Christine. Like Christine is a Cameroonian woman who was living in one of the camps that we worked in. And we had a twinning project for integration. She managed to find a job in a small Airbnb close to the Vitos Gorge, which is a very touristic place. It's actually the deepest gorge in Europe, the deepest canyon in Europe, that is quite close to the camp where we were, where she was living. And she started working there and having a normal life, we can say. And so we went to see her, and we realized she hadn't been to the gorge. And so, without really much thought, without much philosophy, we said, right, Christine, let's go. Let's go to see this gorge that everyone from all over the world comes to see. And in that moment, Ilaria, in that moment, I realized that that was the first time in maybe 3, 4, 5 years that Christine was doing something for herself. Not because she needed to be there, not because she had to queue for an appointment with a lawyer, not because she had to escape something, because she wanted to be there. Imagine, like even the most busy people, like we all take 15 minutes to even have a walk, listen to something. This was her thinking about herself and thinking about her happiness, thing that could be considered unnecessary, and it's what makes somehow
And
human.
sorry, if you go back to that beautiful picture, is also very, very, it's telling us that in there are two human beings just walking the same land on the earth and sharing maybe laughter and thoughts and feelings without any boundary, any difference in that specific moment. I think also for you, it was enriching and also kind of a discovery of the way we can interact and build new relationships with people. I put in the description of this webinar that we all are refugees in our life sometimes. It's not because we are all escaping from something at times in our lives. And so when we have someone who can walk with us, probably that is the most powerful moment that we can share with another human being.
Like she was terrified. She was, because you cannot see it in this picture, but like 1 meter to my side, there is a big dip, like one
Precipice.
kilometer.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And like, but it was like, I'm sure that if I had gone there with my mother, the same dynamic would have happened, and that was very, very, very rewarding. This idea of not seeing people as victims is all that we do. Like we try to
Mm.
not focus too much on being a victim of experience. Like there is this beautiful book by Ruth Kluger. She's a Holocaust survivor. And me saying this is exactly doing what I'm preaching not to do. Like she says, yes, of course I was in Auschwitz, but I don't want people when I go to speak at conferences to just say, "Oh, she was in Auschwitz," like if that is her identity. And that's exactly what I did, because it's very difficult. But there is this kind of idea of uh, that you can see people as victims in many ways. Of course, as victims of experiences of trauma. Sure, we understand that, like that you expect people to be less capable. You cannot, we have a lot of teachers on the team. We teach languages, and an approach could be, we don't give exams to students because they have gone through a lot. We cannot do that. And like the students ask us for a lot of exams. They like tests. They want to be tested. There is that maybe less intuitive idea, but of course very understandable, that when you romanticize people, when you expect someone, this idea that they have gone through a lot, they have escaped war, so wonderful, and and
They are
and
heroes.
they are heroes. They are, and like as a researcher who studies these things, says, like, when you see someone as a victim, it's very easy to do something heroic. You woke up this morning, Ilaria, you're a hero, or you were here on time, you're a hero. And
Yeah.
this kind of is the same. And there is also this idea of stereotyping people, like expecting all people from uh, traditional culture to act in a certain way, like basically not having a brain, not having the ability to act in one way or another. This is one of the case studies of our training. I, of course, just put it here to scare you out with all of this. Uh, but no,
No, no, there's a
there is,
lot of work. It means that there's a lot of work
but
going on.
you know what? I put it because we do try to scare people in a way to say, like, what when people come to our team and we have to train them on how to deal with situations that happen in refugee camps, we tell them, look, there is nothing we can tell you to prepare you for every one of the situations that happen in the camp. So what we can do is prepare you for being unprepared. And basically, this is what these kind of trainings are used for. So there is a situation, you give a solution, is is wrong, and you try to fix it, is wrong. Like we have to be comfortable with doing things that are suboptimal because we are not always perfect, and sometimes the ethical situations are just difficult. And so I think this kind of theme that shows a little bit of the things that I've said, like what do we mean by other? It's like treating a person like the other, like seeing someone like someone far from us, like a sort of us in them. And while I think
And
it's
Giovanni,
somehow,
please let me ask the people here. Let me ask these questions to you directly. What does it mean, otherness, to you all participants today, and what feelings you correlate to otherness? Can you please type in the chat a few words what otherness means to you and what feelings are connected? At 6 seconds, maybe I didn't introduce our organization, but I'm sure you probably all know, but we work with emotional intelligence, and then I will ask a few questions, ask Giovanni a few questions about that. But please just connect the word and the concept of otherness to some emotions. Please go on, Giovanni. Thank you.
yeah, it's very much what we were saying, you know, like there are sort of forms to other people that we know. Like if we think of people that might be against refugees, we can easily think of people that think, okay, refugees steal our jobs, or refugees are thieves, or any kind of. But what we try to address is the fact that we can also, in good faith, with good intentions, other people. Like, and the way we other people is by seeing them as victims. And so this is very much with secondary what we try to do. We still work in Greek refugee camps, but we also do trainings on our model, which is just trying to de-victimize the person, to try to make them from refugees to people, or that in our conception. And I want to finish with a story that shows you
And
how
before your story, let me read for you because people put their
uh,
answers in the chat, and they are very, very interesting. Greg, for example, he wrote, could mean that you are less than someone else or not part of the club. So the feeling is you can feel rejected in a way. And then Rich wrote, otherness means another human. So something different in any case. Christina, not part of a group, outcast, not included, Beryl wrote. Aga, separation, exclusion are the feelings when they hear or they think of this term, otherness. And Rich also put empathy and understanding. You see, at the other side, empathy and understanding. And then judged, Beryl said, unfriendly, or exclusion versus inclusion, Amal said. And it's true, I think, uh, starting from different points of view and different experiences, different backgrounds, and different cultures, when we hear this term of otherness, every one of us can go in different directions and also different feelings.
and actually many of the things you read that our listeners are mentioning are things that refugees themselves have told us in interviews
Mm.
they feel when people other them, when people see them as less or as more like a hero. And it's important to be aware, but again, we could like it's important to be aware, but it's also very difficult to not do it at all. It's important to know that we are doing it. You know, like here we like in our policy we say do not patronize, do not stereotype,
Yeah, and
do
not
not
judge,
romanticize.
and don't
Yeah,
judge, because also
yeah,
us, if a person is feeling like that, of course, the idea of non-discrimination and inclusion and is just accepting and maybe supporting that, you know, the difference between us and them, we can change this view, we can discuss together, as you were mentioning. Yeah, absolutely.
And I wanted to just tell you this last story about our Scouts program and actually about Zakia. So we have a youth program that is kind of Scouts themed. Um, it's actually an education program, but so that the children, beside going to school, also go to excursions, like they're in refugee camps closed with barbed wire, so taking them out. But it's also a matter of having an identity, and also for the children to think, oh, it's school, I'm going to scouts, not I'm going to school. But so what happened was that this girl, she's an Afghan girl called Zakia. She had she had three friends, three Afghan teenagers like her that had come in 2016 or 2017, and for years they were with her. And at some point in the instant space or 3 or 4 weeks, they left. Like one went to Germany, one went to Switzerland, one went to well, another one went to Germany, and so she was sort of alone. She's a very smart girl. She's like at the time she was 16. Now she's a little bit older, and you know, like we thought, you know, we're good. We want to do something nice for her. Let's invite her to the scout programs. But instead of telling her the truth, we told her, you know, Zakia, we need your help. We didn't want to show you. We need your help. We there are these Afghan girls younger than you. We don't speak their language. We need a scout leader. We need a translator. Blah blah blah. So, and you know, we talked to her and we said, you want to join? And she said, yes, yes, of course, I'm going to do it. I'm going to come. And so she started coming to our scout program and being the scout leader. And and we thought they were very good. We were very happy with ourselves. And this is the message that Zakia's teacher sent me a few weeks later saying, okay, you can see, well, below is the message from Zakia. Don't tell her I shared with you. And here Zakia says, thank you. Yes, I'm working with the scouts because when my friends Fatih Mahnaz left, I was alone. So teacher Holly, Giovanni, that's how she spelled my name, and Lucas decided to invite me to scouts so I don't feel sad and alone. So obviously she had understood everything. And we
Of
were
course.
and one thing that is beautiful to think of, these are three girls, like three refugee Afghan girls that were basically the one that sort of replaced Mahnaz, Farzana. Uh, and once we posted this picture on Facebook, of course, they're younger. They see Zakia. You see her, the second from the left, as a model. And and you know, like I don't know what you would have done when you were 13, but if I had seen a picture of a friend of mine that sort of replaced me, I would have thought, okay, maybe I would have been a little bit jealous. But actually, Farzana, one of the girls who had left, sent like commented on Facebook saying, "I hope the girls around you know how kind and beautiful and funny you are. I really miss you and the other girls." So let's say if this is the future of Europe, we have some hope.
Absolutely. Thank you, Giovanni. Thank you for telling us this story. And it's through really through storytelling that we can really touch the heart of an experience. And those beautiful pictures were absolutely fantastic, and they probably speak more than 1,000 words, as we say. And let's continue our conversation. And I ask you a question that I want to also address to our participants too. So you fundamentally through your model that I'd like you to maybe explain a little bit more now on how practically you are able to build these communities of engagement that I love calling also community of resilience. And I'd like to ask our participant, how do you think we can build, maybe in your ordinary experience, or maybe you also, maybe you can share with us if you worked with refugees or with, you know, trying to build communities in your life, whatever are these communities, what do you really do and feel and think practically in order to build resilience and to build engagement? Please share in the chat, and you, Giovanni, share your model, please.
Yeah, I think that there is a sort of idea of respect or also of safety that is a little bit superficial. Like in the sense that what we have learned is that the places that are safe for people, the places where you feel safe as in a community are not the place that treat you nicely. They are the places that respect you, or actually not that they respect you, but respect you, you as an individual. Like there is this kind of sense of um, seeing you beyond all of the other, as we said, experience of, in our cases, of displacement or of disadvantage, discrimination, connection, as I read now. I would say that there are two components to our model, but basically to building community. Like one is sharing an understanding of what the basis of the community is. Like what are the rules? What are the things that we can build together in order for um, us to understand how it works? How do we work well together? And you know, like this might be sometimes counterintuitive, but it's important to set the baseline for everyone, and also to have rules that are strict for people when the people have agreed to them. Like I often tell the story of the Syrian guy called Abdallah, who had entered one of our English classes in late. And we are quite, you know, the learning space is a sacred space. It's not because this is a class in a refugee camp or in a community center that learning is less important. It's actually more important. And so we say that you can enter the class from, let's say, 4 to 4:05, but at 4:06 the door is closed and people cannot be disturbed. And this person, Abdallah, had come in probably at 4:30 or 4:35, I don't know when, and I was not there. So the teacher basically told him, no, you cannot come in. And and so I happened to enter the community center at the time, and he came to me. I didn't know what had happened, and he started telling me, you know, like the teacher mistreated me, and I didn't know what had happened. So I said, okay, let's go and talk to the teacher. I speak a little bit of Arabic. We have this conversation, and so I said, okay, first thing, let's make the people meet them. So I started climbing the stairs to the class, and then I saw that the door was closed, and I say, Abdallah, we have to wait for the end of the class and then we can talk to the teacher. And he said, oh, it applies to you too. Oh, then no problem. And he just left because he saw that the rules applied to him as well.
To every, yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I think that the other aspect that is important in our context is understanding, and I know how this is also central to you, is not that you have to avoid uh, emotional or sensitive or even traumatic uh, places. You have to be aware of them. I remember once one of actually our program director was invited to have a conference in an important American university, and you know they work a lot on trigger warnings and what are the things that you can do to avoid talking in the class about things that are sensitive. And 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 you know, like what she told them is, look, we work with people who have had their house bombed, or we work with people who have had their like any kind of thing could be a trigger, like the table moving could be a trigger. So what you have to do is something much harder than avoiding. You have to be extremely aware. You have to see what people
Absolutely.
do. You know, we cannot afford to avoid all of the triggers, also because we want to equip people with you know, should we not talk about travel because people have endured difficult things during travel? So we have to be extremely aware. And I remember one thing she said at the end of that speech, where like for some people that will be a safe place, for others will be an engaging space, for some will be a learning space, but most importantly for everyone it's going to be a blend of all of it, because we are here as a community that we are creating together.
Absolutely. And I remember when we discussed, and then I will read a few answers in the chat. What I was really thinking of when you were sharing with me your model are two things. One is the what you described, so the need of an agreement. So you told me we don't go there and we impose. We discuss with people. We really want them to agree on what we decide together. And then I thought, well, this is exactly what, for example, at 6 Seconds we do in bringing social emotional learning into classrooms. So we tell our teachers that the first thing to do is, first of all, not setting rules, but creating agreements. So then people respect those rules because they agreed on those rules, right? And so you can do this at the beginning of the year, and for you is at the beginning of your relationship with the refugees. And the second aspect is this deep connection that is more of an understanding, as you said, and compassion, and not hiding. It's an authentic connection, because you don't say, oh, I understand you because I experienced exactly. No, you can't be authentic in that moment. It's authentic because you care, and because you are there trying to understand, even though of course you've not been bombed, not like that, but you are there with your vulnerability, accepting theirs, and saying, I'm here to do something, I'm here to support. What can we do together? How can I support you? And what do you want me to do somehow? So these were really these two things that I think are really what in emotional intelligence we need: a deep connection through compassion and empathy. And on the other side, the agreement. So finding a common ground after a deep listening and discussion. So if we, let me read also a little bit what Beryl, for example, wrote. And she wrote, respecting uniqueness. For example, when we want to build this community or increase resilience and engagement. And another important thing, giving choices, offering choices, and then connection and safety. I think offering choices is also to people who didn't have any alternative. I think it's very powerful. And then fun, laughter, fun, and rules for boundaries, for sure. And then Amal wrote, for engagement and understanding, I think more awareness is needed. Let people know more about the work. And second three, sharing more success stories to create connections. It's true. Very often we talk about everything at the news. We only hear bad news. Nobody talks about all the organizations like yours bringing hope and practical support to these people. So this should be definitely communicated more. And then the Beryl again, trauma-informed approach. So taking small steps and not trying to take a big, of course, step at once. And the supporters should practice self-compassion to be able to be compassionate. And this is the next question for you, Giovanni, talking about the hundreds of volunteers and your educators. How do you support them to enter this deep connection, this relationship with people who are in need and people who lived what they experienced?
Yeah, I think that's a question that doesn't really have a perfect answer, in the sense that people will experience proxy trauma, people will be in a situation that is difficult, and probably the one of the things we realize is that the common understandings of work-life balance in the humanitarian work might not be very efficient, because they're sort of built on the idea that you do your work in order to then have your life. So you close at 5 and then you go to do what your life is for.
Mm.
When you're working in a refugee camp, that doesn't work, because every choice is so important. And the person who cannot be attended to is someone in need. And it's very difficult for anyone to say, you know, my decision to go for a beer with friends is more important than someone having a livelihood or having a shelter or having a blanket and so on. And so we try to sort of reverse this and say, okay, we don't do 9 to 5, but you should be able in every moment of the day, if you want, to take some time for you. is not the only way that you can be productive, of course, but you should be able to produce your own joy. That's a way of you being productive. And this is something that is very important because I have seen this like in the past few years. I've also helped with strategy, some grassroots organizations. Like one of the things that people often are is decision fatigue because you are always making decisions for people and with people and decisions that have really potentially difficult consequences. And so I think also the role of management, the role of people who are more senior is really to try to cater for this. And one of the joke that the jokes that we have is that people often think that people that have more experience or people who are more senior know more. And so sometimes when people ask me, "Well, what should I do?" and one of my common answers is, "I have no clue, but if you want to me to share the burden of a potentially bad decision, I'm here for you." And so I think this is the kind of sort of thing that is important, and also introduces that aspect of irony and laughter that one of the people was commenting, and I
Yeah.
think it's paramount. That is so important. And maybe if we have time later, I thought of one interview that we had with a with actually one of the refugees that we worked with, and what she said was the people that we were. Do you think I can share an audio? It's 20
I
seconds.
think so. Yes, yes,
Let
absolutely.
let me hear.
You
Could
know,
you hear
you
that?
you need to go to advanced
Okay.
setting. So when you
Okay.
share, then you go to advanced settings and you put
Okay.
share audio.
Mm, I don't think I have that option. Maybe it's if it's too. Should I? Ah,
So
okay. Yeah.
you found
I
it?
found it. Yeah. So let me see. This is just to give context. This is an interview. This is my calendar. This is an interview that we were having with one of the people who had been in one of the camps we were in, and we wanted to understand what were the good practices. What are the things that we needed, and what are the things that were important to tell other humanitarians. What are the things that work?
Mm.
And so this is what I asked this girl Mahnaz, and she gave me an answer that was quite surprising for me. More of what you got, and in those 4 years, what you needed more of, what you got and was good. Like, what is something that, a new volunteer comes and you say, okay, this is the piece of advice that I give you.
Well, the good people used to like make fun of me in a good way, and like they used to joke.
He says the good people were the ones who made fun of me. Like they treated me like a human being. They were
Of course,
and
of
and
course.
that's so important because we think, would you ever make a joke to an African girl who has a terrible situation?
Yeah.
Of course you do, because he's a human being.
Yeah, and when we also had our conversation prior to the webinar, I remember that you shared with me a story of a volunteer of one of your staff members who came to you and said, I can't do it. And she was, because she was a newcomer and she was really struggling with her role. And in that moment, when you were sharing that story, I thought that you need to have a community inside the community. I mean, I think that between all of you, all the volunteers, and you need, and you are supporting each other also with irony and fun in order to overcome the challenges that you, of course, you experience. And also you told me one other thing about bias, that all of us, we have bias. And so of course they come to our mind every time that we interact with people, and just we need to make peace with those, right? We need to make peace with our bias, and of course go beyond those, but being aware of our patterns, be aware of our bias. And this is probably one of the hardest things to do, to be aware of how emotionally and also our our thoughts are in terms of when this happens, I usually react like that, and shift towards a response that is not exactly what our brain and our behaviors are used to. Right, Giovanni?
I think like what you said is uh, very much like is the essence of somehow being human. Like it's in a way this kind of awareness and also this kind of sharing with others your vulnerabilities. It's sort of re-empowering other people through empowering or sort of through showing other people that you could be in the same situation and things are okay, you can do these things. And I think
Absolutely.
that the community that we have created inside secondary in our staff very much responds to that. You know, like we
Mm.
focus on people, we invest a lot in our staff. That's the only uh, asset that we have.
Yeah, and I love what Rachel also put in the chat saying being curious for those who are different. So using curiosity is that is an emotion, and it's a powerful, powerful way to then get in contact and wanted to learn more from them, sitting with them and hearing their stories, and in a conversation like you and us and I are having now. So I really believe that this is also another key point that probably you put in action with your volunteers.
Sure, for sure. It's not is not only having the curiosity for the difference, but curiosity for the other individual. Because sometimes, you know, like we have this idea, okay, it's fun. We are going to have a dinner in a Syrian tent with Syrian food. Of course, that's very interesting. But it's more interesting to have dinner at Fatima's tent, and she will be much more different than you would expect from Wala, who you had dinner 2 days before. But it's one thing that I've learned in this context is that the differences between people inside a group are much bigger than the differences between groups. And if you get a random person from Syria or Brazil or Thailand, they're very likely to be similar to someone from another place, and there is a huge variety from people from the same place.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then I think when people from different cultures they then live a similar experience, they build other other experiences together, and they build similarities and commonalities. So it's really about creating that connection that then it's just like a layering experiences. And so then your background is just and your past becomes part of the present that you are building with other people coming from different countries and together with the volunteers. And it's really really this the way probably to build the communities of engagement and resilience.
So also because you know, like experience can be a burden, or you know,
True.
sometimes people come and say, you know, we have classes in which there are people from two ethnic groups that hate each other back in their country. So what do you say? You know, one hates the other, and that's you know that is their culture. We tell them, no, 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 we are building this culture together. When
Yeah.
you enter here, you're something new. Let's build something new together. And those are the agreements or rules that we were talking
Absolutely. And Rachel, absolutely, I we perfectly understood that definitely you were saying being interest in people's, in their stories, in their narrative, in what they are in the moment also living and feeling. So absolutely, this is the approach to be authentically curious, because we want to know in order to even enrich ourselves in the moment of the conversation. And being time wise, I also would love to profit of you, to having you here, Giovanni, to maybe receive from you some recommendations. As I said at the beginning, uh, today we are sharing your stories, interesting, inspiring stories from refugee camps. But as I said, all of us, we found ourselves at times in our life feeling just like refugees, right? So if you could give one recommendation to us in when we try to take refuge, when what can we do, what how can we feel, what should we do in taking refuge, what is one thing that we could do to
I,
feel better?
I don't know if you are like, there is this way of saying in I think in the US, where you say when in trouble go big, and I usually say when in trouble go meta. What I mean by that, like, it's the same thing in our personal life. Maybe one of your best friends has had a mourning, like their mother or their friend died, and you don't know what to say, and probably the best thing to say is, look, Mark, I don't know what to say. And the same thing in explosive vulnerability happens in many situations in which we are in a difficult situation. In a camp, there is a Syrian refugee shouting at you because you haven't provided the service that this person was expecting. And actually, you think he has a point. And so you say, look, this is why I did it. I think I made a mistake. And so always explaining when you don't know what choice to make, to tell other people, look, I don't know what choice to make. I think it's a good rule because people relate to that and understand that. And in a way, as we were saying, is that exposing your vulnerability show a form of strength or robustness that people can connect to.
Absolutely. And I believe that we believe at 6 seconds that probably the answer is the community. So finding uh, people around you, and that could even be not friends, as you said, but people who, with whom maybe you can share your suffering, and you can talk to, and you can be heard. And so communities where just places, spaces to be listened, and this is a way to move together. And probably these communities are still not so spread in the world. I feel that as per our research, also recent research, the state of the art research that I shared with you, Giovanni, we are um, noticing, and our data is saying that we are living an emotional recession. And because the world is in a kind of global economical and political recession, and can we how can we be stay positive, or can we see the light? Probably in if we could have more communities just like those that we are building for refugees, but building together these kind of communities where we are more resilient because we feel the strength of others with us. This could be a new way to face all the suffering and the struggles that we all are living every day, I think.
Yeah, I very much agree. And in that sense, like what you were describing is really having awareness, being able to control it, and being able to put it to service for other people and for yourself.
Absolutely. So I don't know if you participants, you have any further questions for Giovanni, for the experience, the stories that he shared. Please do it. We have just a few minutes more, and so we can take your questions. Just probably just one question, one or two questions if you have more. And I see that Rachel also wrote Yes, Rachel, yes, you're saying you spoke about a model. Yes, maybe could you reframe the model, Giovanni, for Rachel? And when we speak about the model, it's a framework, it's a way to proceed, right?
Like the thing is that in over the course of the years, we have moved from working only in refugee camps, also with municipalities and local
Oh yeah,
authorities.
exactly. This is very important. Please share with us this.
And so the different types of like the overarching approach is the same, and it's based on this idea of trying to uh, like undermine the positive biases also as long also with the negative ones. And so what we do is that, again, as I explained, like it didn't start as this, but we have a policy and a training that we give our staff and then other partners like municipalities and so on. And the idea is that there are specific values that stem from this consideration depending on the situation. So, for example, in the case of uh, the refugee camps, the values are trust, engagement, and fairness. And for example, the asp and this is have very specific implications in the model. Of course, the aspect of fairness, of really radical fairness, maybe in a more municipal context, has a different kind of need. But basically, what we want to do is to basically take people and ourselves from the idea of thinking of refugees through the lens of victimhood and starting to more and more re-seeing them as people, as individuals with their own characteristics that are not given by their trauma, by their heroism, or by their culture.
Absolutely. And again, when we were discussing, for me, it's I remember we were using this term that is lab. So considering the experience with refugees, an experience that can be scaled up to with the policymakers, so with governments at a higher level. So the experience that you are having with refugees is telling a story, is telling something that at a government level, at with trainers, with organizations can be done, not only for the refugees but for the whole humanity, I mean for all people. So this was the emotion, the idea of a model that then can be somehow integrated in something bigger, let's say, even though of course it's already touching so many lives. Is this correct what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, of course. You want to try to have the biggest impact, and you want to have all of the participants be able to contribute, and this is the best way to do it.
Yeah. And yes, Rachel, we mentioned inclusion at the very beginning, and when also Giovanni shared the slides, there was the specific reference to inclusion, of course, and that is, inclusion, equity. We talked about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, because definitely when building the communities of engagement and resilience, you create a sense of belonging between not only the refugees but also the volunteers who are in that moment in that camp are working with the people, right?
I think it's important to see inclusion as a tool to include individuals and not groups, or to involve humans and not groups. Because sometimes you have this idea that you have to include a specific amount of people and with some characteristics, and that ends up being sort of tokenistic, and that creates problems in terms of positive biases. And so what we try to see is that people for being people and not as representative of their group, because often when you respect a group or a culture, you're respecting who has power in that group or in that culture.
This is very true. So thank you so much. Thank you all of you for sharing your thoughts in the chat, and for you, Giovanni, for this beautiful testimonial, and for sharing with us your model. It was very, very important for us at 6 Seconds to have you here, and we will share with all of you the recording, and we will put the recording also on social media, so you will be able to rewatch even some passages. So thank you again, and have a good evening or morning, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you, Giovanni.
Thank you all. Thank you all.